mid '90s. Jonah Hill's new film, which it was decent.
Hey, I'll send you the feed from Ken.
Nobody knew yesterday. I didn't have to go.
Oh, no, we shared it. It was very nice.
Yes, got it.
And then, also there's a revision, America's mentioned to you, there's a revision of, step, minutes.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well.
What we need to do is get a gym set up for the board meetings. Let's get some dramatic shots. It'd be fun.
Then you can't tell because everybody's.
So you said you do have a gym?
And that's
Similar to the one? Do you think you could put someone on it? Okay. Hey, the call should be the ball.
I call to order the November 5th, 2018 regular business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in attendance to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates? Present. Ms. Bolter? Present. Mrs. Copeland-Dansby? Present. Mr. Davis? Mr. Messer?
Present.
Mr. Borowski?
Present.
President Jones?
Here. Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the special public meeting October 20th, 2018, special meeting October 22nd, 2018, and the regular business meeting October 22nd, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, committee reports. Ms. Bolton, would you please present the October 16th Strategic Engagement Planning Committee meeting?
Yes, thank you very much. You have before you the minutes. These topics dealt with at that time were individual strategic plans from around the country, a discussion of equity in education, and we also did rather extensively review the results of the compiled SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats themes that we had accomplished individually as a group and then in 4 groups. For the purpose of discussion, we particularly highlighted those topics in the SWOT that were mentioned in 3 of the 4 categories and 2 of the 4 categories, just to expedite discussion. And then we concluded the meeting with that and determined we were not yet ready to create any working groups or standing committees until we would have like the next meeting and be apprised of what that might mean. Submit and hope for approval, and I think you'll see the results in the second one, particularly that might be of interest to you regarding the SWOT results.
Okay, thank you. Do board members have any questions or comments about the report? Okay, how about we just jump ahead to that second report? Ms. Copeland-Dansby, would you please present the report?
Thank you very much. The Strategic Engagement and Planning Committee met on November 5th. And I want to thank all those who attend. We've got a really great, robust, engaged group of folk that participate in that particular committee. So there is actually a revised report than what was originally in the packet and sent. And you'll see that it is redlined to include the results and outcomes of the work session as it pertains to the strategic plan, the SWOT analysis. And so there was an update related there, and there is an updated copy of that chart in the packet. Secondarily to that, really great conversation as a result of the board's retreat that we held, or work session that we held on 10/20. There was a PowerPoint done that represents the 5 key areas. Number 1, growth, community engagement, and influence. Creating better systems, student-centric decision-making, safety, and security. So these are the external priorities for the fiscal years 2019 and 2020 in which the strategic planning group will work towards. And in closing, we had a really great presentation from Mr. Bob Scallon, who is partner of Pathway Guidance as a presenter, and he talked with us about exactly what a strategic plan is. We talked about organizational performance models, pathways, building blocks for high-performing organizations, and the 9 principles of organizational excellence. And so we're looking forward to our continued work, as Ms. Bolton said, putting together our work groups in that. I think we're in a really, really good place related to the Strategic Engagement and Planning Committee, and I present these minutes as written.
Do board members have questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Ms. Bates, would you please present the October 18 Policy Committee meeting report?
Yes, thank you. Many of the policies that were discussed during this meeting were moved to the full board for adoption, so those you are familiar with. And then there was some housekeeping regarding the movement of other policy review. 2 significant changes to policy, potential changes to policy, are still under review, pending more information. And one is our continued discussion on kindergarten entrance requirements. And the committee requested data so that this decision is data-driven and child-centered. And our liaison, or Vera Brooks from Early Childhood, will be gathering that data and presenting policy committee meeting. And there was a recommendation from legal counsel that we consider a policy on crowdfunding. And there is still information that we need to obtain to proceed with this policy, and there will be further consideration of a draft policy at the December 20th Policy Committee. So I submit these policy minutes for acceptance as written.
Do board members have any questions or comments? Okay. Ms. Bolton, please present the Student Achievement Committee meeting report.
Thank you. Gladly. We had a presentation from the Taft High School Foundation regarding their interest, once again, about using the opportunity of the building of the new Stargell Stadium in order to use that opportunity to perhaps raise money for the foundation, and they gave us a description of the use. I think the most important thing that came from that discussion, and I think our members on the committee will substantiate it, was our interest in finding ways to facilitate the creation of more foundations for all of our schools, each of our schools, obviously within policy and legal requirements. We also had a great presentation from Vera Brooks regarding preschool enrollment and the expansion, and also the most current or recent kindergarten readiness assessment. And that's on a couple of pages for us. And then what we've been doing, I think almost every month, is we had a report from the community, particular groups that might be interested in partnering with CPS or offer a particular service. And indeed, it was this month, it was Friends of Children. It was a very interesting connection that they perhaps can make with us, and I think we tied the administration and them together. We talked briefly about the usage space at Aiken, and as a matter of fact, I visited Aiken on Friday and saw the space where the new preschool area is going to be located, and I believe that's it's going to be a great opportunity for a career path for our kids, as well as more preschool there. And then we also had an extensive discussion that is going to be reaching its conclusion in November and December regarding the AIR 6 recommendations regarding teacher evaluation. And we have an end point in mind, being December, and I know that the administration will be coming with a recommendation, and I think we did use the word frustrated somewhere in the minutes briefly. And then we had not a presentation, but sharing of some information regarding teacher evaluation performance, and some brief discussion about equitable access to effective teachers. And we did see a comparison with ourselves regarding workforce index compared to other Ohio urbans, which was of interest. And then the curricular development and adoption process, we just got a brief overview again and reassurance that it will, as best as it can, the 3 or so that are up for this year will match in part the process used for social studies, which I think we all felt comfortable about. It doesn't work completely step by step, but there's an effort. We did get good news from Mr. Miles regarding our high school accreditation, which I'm sure we're going to be making possibly an assignment today about that. And we weren't able yet to get the report regarding community learning centers, revenue sources, and uses. And then we started a long process of getting updates on all of the 2020 schools, of all 3 phases. And we did start, again, a conversation, and it will go forward, I think, both in policy and perhaps in student achievement, and as we heard last week in transportation, probably a whole board discussion regarding attendance boundaries and attendance lines. Finally, that's it, finally. Finally.
Thank
I
you.
submit and hope for adoption.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments about the report? Okay, Mr. Messer, would you please present the Finance Committee report?
Yes, Madam President. I present the Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, October 18th. And I'll be brief, as some of these things actually were talked about at our meeting in between this meeting and us now reviewing the minutes. But the short story is, hopefully everyone here and on the radio have all voted. But we did our part from an education standpoint, in that our superintendent has met with both of our gubernatorial candidates, and according to our lobbyists, represented our district extremely well and represented districts across the state very well. And so we will put all of our votes to work tomorrow, but thank the superintendent for representing us with both of those campaigns. You'll see the general treasurer updates, nothing that's off track, no surprises. We're plugging along just as the plan suggests. Where we do have some questions is specifically getting into the nuts and bolts of the CRA agreements and the abatements, TIF agreements, et cetera. I think we can all agree that there's some education for those of us who probably don't use these as much as some people. So there was some brief conversation about how we can ensure there is a common understanding among our education community. But then also digging in to specifically use a couple of the most recent ones as a learning opportunity, almost case studies, for us to understand, for example, why a certain development would be given a 30-year agreement in one case, and maybe another one gets a 5-year agreement, and how those decisions are made, and frankly, the impact it has to taxpayers as it relates to funding education for our children in our district. So we have invited people to join us from the city, representatives from the city, to kind of present that process and specifically dig into that specific development. And so we will include that in our next upcoming finance meeting. Just a couple of other things. I know it was very top line, talked about the last board meeting, but it's worth reinforcing here that thanks to the work of the superintendent and her team, we were, through Strive, awarded a $750,000 planning grant to focus on 8th grade mathematics for some of our most at opportunity youth, which is going to have huge dividends on their life success. We congratulate the team for their work there. We already hit 5-year forecast at our last meeting. A couple of other things. Brittany talked about the financial internship program, of which there were significant numbers of applicants for that program. And many of them are also CPS grads who then have been applied to be a part of our internship program. So that's pretty exciting, and continues to build a pipeline for the district. And then we will have our kind of first overview of current state as far as green initiatives at our November 15th meeting, as well as having Ollie Kroner from the city of Cincinnati to present the city's plan briefly, so that we can determine how we, along with other organizations throughout the city, can feed into what the city as a whole is doing, and getting some really good recognition there. So with that, I present the minutes as written.
Thank you, Mr. Messer. Do board members have questions or comments? Ms. Bolton?
Just one comment, I think I broke my concentration on it, so I didn't quite hear about the city plan. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yes, Ollie Kroner is playing point guard for the city of Cincinnati for the green initiatives that have been talked about a lot in the press lately. Some great accomplishments there. And frankly, he had approached me and I believe board member Morosky early on. And I was just trying to figure out when the meetings were. So we didn't quite have a place to figure out where that worked and fit into our efforts. And when it was decided that finance would be a place where that could fit, by then now the city has gotten a pretty good comprehensive plan on things that the city is, and he's a wealth of knowledge to know which types of grants and funding would be available to help us do some of the green initiatives, including funding some educational programs that maybe the rest of us may not be, because he's waking up every day doing that type of work.
I thank you, and I'll be a little snarky, but it's good that the city's catching up with the school district regarding green initiatives.
Very good.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Bates, would you please present the audit committee report?
Yes, thank you. We had reports on various audits. We received a presentation by Jessica Shelley on the food services audits and reviews. We received an update on charter school funding, which this year, 11 charter schools closed and 6 opened, and the funding for that is reported in your minutes. Also, this department of the administration, Connie Solano's, I think she does many things for the district and as Director of Performance and Accountability, but one of her tasks is to ensure that all the students who are in charter schools should be enrolled in charter schools as a Cincinnati Public School resident. And her staff literally goes through records one by one to make sure that every child that charter school funding was requested for actually deserves that funding, because in the past we had been losing hundreds of thousands of dollars by just not contesting where people lived. I guess the word was out, right? Not anymore. We also received an update on the audit status report, which you can read. And there was continued discussion about tax abatements and how our district and our administration and the board should be approaching this. The city gave its recommendation or its view on tax abatements at an ACES meeting, and as we all know, ACES is in hospice. So the administration still wants to respond with. But it is. That is. The administration does want to respond to the city's presentation. So the administration will work on a response presented to this board, and then we will also present it to audit and to the city at some point on our perspective on tax abatements and how it affects us. So I present the audit committee minutes as written for adoption or for acceptance.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Borowski.
I think this is great, and I'm always impressed with Ms. Shelley and what she does in food services. And I also found out from Jessica that I think is exciting, and I just wanted to comment on it, is that she's going to be giving a presentation with the Good Food Purchasing Policy folks regarding procurement at December 10th meeting, I guess. So, but all of this news, it seems to me, when I talk to other folks in other districts who are looking around, I mean, this whole report is great, but the focus on the food and everything that we've been able to do, I think, just needs an extra highlight, and this will save me a kudo later on as well, I think, all the awards that they've been getting.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Ms. Bolton?
I'm glad that through the audit committee and then through the board, that our perspective on tax abatements and what have you will get into the public record, because the public record that was entered and maintained in that presentation by the city was false.
Mm-hmm.
So my comment in regard to the report has to do with ACES being in hospice, and I had to stop putting it on the agenda because you all told me to stop putting it on the agenda. But at some point, we know we need to deal with and address what is our relationship with city government. So just want to put that out there, but I won't mention that name anymore. Okay. Okay. I need a motion to accept the minutes as written.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Does anyone have kudos?
I do.
Mr. Morosky.
I'd just like to give some kudos to Kim and Colleen at the Euler Hampton Mentoring Program. As most people here know, I mentor down there, and this year's been off to an awesome start, and there are a ton of mentors and a lot of kids, and all the kids seem pretty confident after they took their third grade tests. So, you know, I'm with the third graders in reading, so I wanted to give Kim and Colleen a special shout out for a great start to the year and a lot of kids that are doing well because of it.
Thank you. Great. Other kudos. Ms. Bates.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a kudo to Jessica Shelley, and maybe it's because she feeds us at Committee of the Whole that we always feel like we need to give her kudos, which is a good reason to give somebody kudos. But I was at I represented our district at the Council of Great City Schools Board of Directors meeting last month. And during that meeting, during the executive director's reports, one of his reports, Michael Casserly called out Jessica Shelley and her the representative from Miami-Dade for being instrumental in influencing Secretary Perdue in the federal legislative bill on school nutrition. And I know that we had heard that, but I wanted to give a kudo because she's not just known for,
you know, what she does in our district, but she's really taken it to the national level with her influence and work. So, yay, Jessica, keep up those lunches and congratulations.
Thank you. Other kudos? Mr. Messer.
Yes, on Friday evening, I had a chance to sit down with Megan Cummins of the Cincinnati Women's Fund and had a delightful conversation about opportunities we have in the greater Cincinnati region to increase women in leadership, to be more equitable across the board. But we are very blessed in Cincinnati Public Schools to have women in leadership and doing extremely well, leading our district year after year. And so much so that our superintendent, our CEO, was recognized as one of the women who mean business of across all businesses, corporations, entities across the greater Cincinnati region. And we'll be celebrating her in the coming weeks. But I wanted to publicly congratulate her. I think it speaks to her leadership. And, you know, it really highlights the district in those venues as well, with people throughout the region in lots of different types of fields, et cetera. So congratulations to Laura for that recognition.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are now at the item on our agenda for hearing of the public. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak, and Mrs. Wagner will be our timekeeper. When the buzzer goes off, your 3 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. I have 3 names, so I'm just going to call all 3. I'm sorry? Okay, you're right. I'll get to that after that. Okay. Is that okay? Thank you. So I have 3, Marlena Brookfield, Fred Lampe, and Julie Sellers.
Now it is. So what I want to talk to you about this evening, on October 27th, True Colors, Stater High School's GSTA, we had a workshop at the Glisson Youth Summit. Permission to be Raggedy was the title. And some of our audience members were CPS students from SCPA and Walnut. And what really blew me away, besides they were my babies, the kids, the audience members and our panel, they had this great idea that I had to share with you that, hey, why don't we have a directory of the GSAs and GTSAs in our district and have it put in the student handbooks that go out every year? Because the research is showing that just having an organization like this in the school significantly reduces rates of depression, suicidal ideation. Well, we've got a mental health presentation following. But just to know that this kind of thing is on the campuses and let them know that they have that support, they're not alone, I thought was an amazing idea. And if I can make that an assignment to administration and board and talk to our kids that are interested in doing this, I'm definitely willing to facilitate this. I'm just so proud of them, and I would love to have this be a resource for them. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lampe?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. My name's Fred Lampe. I'm Secretary of the Greater Cincinnati Building and Construction Trades Council. And it was brought to my attention last Thursday that the new Stargell Stadium project, due to the fact that it was taken on by the Cincinnati Public Schools, will not require prevailing wages be paid on that project. And I think I'm just here to point out the irony. You know, we had a career fair 2 weeks ago that we attended. The painters had a booth, the plumbers and pipe fitters had a booth, and the electricians had a booth. And then I was there on behalf of the building trades and all the other apprenticeship programs. And I think it's very ironic how hard we try to draw Cincinnati Public School graduates into our programs, and yet a construction project the size of the new Stargell Stadium will not be required to pay prevailing wage because of some politicians in Columbus 10 years ago. So I think the bids, November 14th sticks in my mind, so it's probably a little too late for anything to happen, but I just wanted to point out that unfortunate circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lampy. Ms. Sellers.
Good evening, everyone. I would just like to say again, we still don't have parking for the teachers and staff at SCPA, and we are 4 months past the date of when we found out that we were not going to have those parking spaces. It was July when we were told that they would not be renewed. And I know that it's getting darker earlier and teachers are having to walk, and students and paras, and in the morning it's dark as they're entering school because of the winter is coming, and there are students who are parking and crossing Central Parkway with no crossing guards or lights. And I just was wondering if there could be some kind of situation that would expedite this so that we could get safe parking at Washington Park Garage where they should be parking. And then secondly, I just want to bring to your attention, because I'm sure you've read through the superintendent's recommendations, that we have lost 15 paras out of this one recommendation, and we've only hired 8 who have been hired or promoted. And this is an ongoing issue. Almost every single board meeting, we lose more people than we're hiring, and it's creating a situation in classrooms of overloaded classrooms. There are classrooms where they need them to help and support the reading and help with all of the testing. And it really creates other problems when they go to lunch and recess and all of those other things because they're shorthanded. And this has been going on for a long time, but we want to know, what is it that we can do? Can we form some kind of a task group of how can we help the district to fill the positions so that we can reduce the overloaded classrooms in CPS and that we can get quality people? I know that there's a couple of ways. Sometimes with retired teachers, if they didn't have to go through the whole 4-hour application, they may come back as a para without having to go through all of that. But there are other ways that we can maybe fill some of those positions. But I do know that it really makes it difficult, especially in the primary classes. And you can see how many overloaded classrooms, and most of those are due to not having paras in those classrooms. So there are some real, like primary, kindergarten, preschool, and those are very important that those paras are in those rooms. But it also stresses the school at lunchtime and recess and breakfast, and because there's just not enough hands in the schools. And I know that some of the schools who have the greatest needs had, at one point, they were 6 and 7 paras short, which you think about that kind of shortage, that many less people in the building for when there's emergencies and doing the responsibilities that they have. So I just would like to say I hope that we can work on something to make sure that we get this moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. My apologies for inadvertently moving past the retirements, but Ms. Bates, would you present the retirements?
Yes, and I only have one. Fortunately, we're only losing one employee to retirement, so, and that is one of our civil service personnel, Meredith Flerlage, who is a paraprofessional, but we congratulate her on her decision and her new life, and we thank her very much for her service to our children.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Ms. Mitchell, would you please introduce our presenter for this evening?
Yes, I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Susan Bunty to come forward. She's going to do an introduction to our presentation with Mind Peace. MindPeace is an organization that provides mental health services to our schools, and so we're fortunate to be joined by Susan Shelton, who is the founder and executive director of MindPeace.
Good evening. I want to introduce formally again to you Susan Shelton. Many of you already know her and the work that she does in our schools. We have an incredibly collaborative relationship with MindPeace and have been fortunate to be able to work with an organization that supports the needs, social, emotional, and mental health needs of all of our students. I appreciate MindPeace especially as we are moving forward during these times because they are really working into the space of prevention now too, not just in that tier 3 top tier level of where students really need intensive supports, but really beginning to explore with us at the table what prevention looks like going forward. So without further ado, I will move aside so Susan can share with you the data that they have been around the supports that our students have been receiving.
Thanks, everybody. It's so nice to be here. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate our partnership. It really is really collaborative, and I work with the district staff and school site staff all the time. Our mission is really about building a seamless system of care for Greater Cincinnati. That's how we started, and what we found through our research was we focused on school-based mental health services and then collaborating with pediatricians who are often the first line of defense for families, and then just helping kids and families find services and remove barriers so they can be successful. So the model of care for a school-based partnership, I thought it would be important just to quickly talk about that. It's chosen by the stakeholders, and one of our first partners, actually you were our second partner. The first partner of MindPeace was Cincinnati Children's Hospital. The second partner was Cincinnati Public Schools, and community learning centers basically were a tipping point for MindPeace, helping empower stakeholders in the community to be able to choose their own partners, and I always thank you for that. Important, it's financially self-sustaining, so no CPS education dollars are used for the partnerships. They're co-located full-time, integrated and aligned, shared outcomes. I had a meeting with superintendent last year that really, I still think about it today because I took it very seriously. She said, you have shown us a lot of inputs, but what about the outcomes? And so we sort of renewed our focus this past year because of that meeting, and I really appreciated it. Accountable, we have a memorandum of agreements for all the schools, continuum of services, so we're moving not just to treatment, but how do we collaborate with school staffs on prevention and intervention, and then equity. So all children are served no matter their payer source. So I go a little crazy with the bubbles, and I apologize, but it all starts with the school and the stakeholders. So every Cincinnati Public School Community Learning Center, with the exception of LEAP, that's going through the process of choosing a partner, has a co-located partner. And there's a network that supports that partnership of there are 17 actually mental health agencies that serve kids that belong to the collaborative. They believe in the partnership and they understand what Cincinnati Public Schools is trying to do, and they are willing to work towards nirvana, as I call it. We always are working towards improving things together. And so MindPeace and the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board and Cincinnati Public Schools established the bigger collaborative a long time ago. Actually, it was in 2008 that we established it, so it's been around. We assist by facilitating the new partnerships, strengthening the partnerships, so processes, roadblocks eliminated, outcomes, data analysis, assistance, and tools for success. And I've really been focusing more on outcomes and data analysis this year with our network. We also need to build capacity for the system. There is a lot of need, and also there's a heightened kind of nervousness about safe schools and the connection between safe schools and needing mental health supports. And so we need to make sure that our mental health world has the capacity to be able to serve kids in schools. So we work on that, and then also work with the community on crisis support efforts. And unfortunately, we have those crises, but we have to be able to respond to them. You guys have a great crisis response team, by the way. It is known when I go to meetings regionally, CPS is known for their crisis response team. Woohoo, yeah. So
Financial equity, so no CPS funding. We braid together resources, and one of the first things we did was with Interact for Health to do an economic model to see that we could really put co-located school-based mental health services in place. And we do that through third-party billing, through Medicaid and private insurance. There's also a Hamilton County levy. We've been blessed every single time it's up for renewal. It's been renewed, knock on wood. And foundation grants then for real gaps. Accomplishments, so private pay families actually have had the least access to care, so we've been working on building capacity so that mental health providers can take both, really any type of insurance. It shouldn't matter for a child how the mental health services get paid for, and that's been a huge piece. So you have had these partners, and we've been partnered with you for 15 years now, so it's kind of amazing. So this is inputs. So we've had referrals. This is for this last school year. So on average, high schools have referred 77, and they can be self-referrals. Students refer themselves on any of those type of schools. Parents refer their children, and then teachers and staff sometimes notice differences in kids and bring that forward. Always with parent permission. None of this is ever done without any parent permission. So our access to care, 71%. I'd want you to know that nationally, access to care is between 25 to 50%. So even though this is an input, it's really important because when kids don't get access to care, then we have a big problem. So 25 to 50%, and we're hitting 71%. I'll talk to you about a quality initiative. We have to change that. Our benchmark is 80%, and we need to get that. You see, we've tried different things. None of them have really made a difference. We're just keep hovering in that line. So our students served, 3,210 students were served last school year, and they chose to participate in treatment, and their parents were involved. Average treatment hours, so on average, kids got 21 hours of treatment. This is significant because in community settings, kids typically only get about 10 to 12 hours of treatment. And so 21 that's because the kids go there at school, they're there, and they're able to and they don't need to be in treatment forever. So this is good. They get treatment, they get better, and that's positive. Medication management. So having access to medication is really difficult. Child psychiatrists are very rare. We're lucky we have Cincinnati Children's that draws some child psychiatrists to our area. But what we like to see is we don't want to see that there's a stigma about it either way, that we're giving too much medication or that kids aren't accessing it at all. So the deeper blue line is that it's therapy only, and the lighter blue line are kids that have access to medication management. And again, that's with parent permission. And often the medication management is offered right at the school, sometimes using the school-based health centers, which is a great piece. Barriers to care. So we've been measuring this. This keeps you up at night. 1,350 kids were identified that did not receive treatment. And these are really valid referrals. So these aren't just, behavior referrals. These are kids that really could use services. And the biggest things are that parent declined services, or we were unable to reach the parents, or that they didn't show up to appointments. So we work at the school site level to try to work to gain the trust of parents and to help reach out in different and better ways. So what are we doing about it? We tried different things, but we thought we really need to do better. So we applied for RCIC, Cincinnati Children's Rapid Cycle Improvement Collaborative Project, and we were accepted. And so this month we kicked it off, and we picked out that parents not coming to the scheduled assessment meetings that count for 16% of those. It's the single biggest barrier. We're going to be testing things there and getting better. And the thing that I like is in our collaborative, we have 6 representatives from different agencies. So they're going to learn the language, learn the process of the rapid cycle improvement processes, and then we'll be able to apply that to other problems. The other thing is that this year we've all made a commitment. Every single partner will now be delivering at the end of this year quality reports. So not just access reports, but quality reports They'll include different things like functioning, student difficulties, numbers of hospitalizations, so we can dive a little deeper. And then we also are doing work with transitions from high schools to whatever, either work or college. We found that there are a lot of kids who are having mental health issues after high school. And we've heard of a lot of kids that are coming home from college or not doing well in work, and so we want to help them. And so we're going to be doing some process work around that with the seniors in all the high schools. Then we also have some things for resources around loss and grieving, suicide prevention, building resilience, trauma-informed care. And I just wanted to, trauma-informed care is really important to the district. They have really one of the only PBIS with trauma-informed care that I've seen. You guys are trendsetters. Yeah, so woo-hoo. And then so MindPeace helps with support because the mental health agencies have the experts in trauma-informed care. They're certified for trauma-informed care. So we partner together to help them. One of the things that it's been identified is turning some of your spaces in the building to calming spaces, or sometimes the in-school suspension into also a calming space to build resilience. And so this is an example of something that's been done recently with Taft Elementary. So it was an in-school suspension space, and now it's a combination of a calming space. And the kids actually go through there are stations with processes. They have to measure themselves on how they come when they come in, how do they feel when they leave, how do they feel, and we're looking at how long do they stay on average, and then also are their discipline rates changed. So, and that's the kind of data. You really, Superintendent Mitchell, you really made an impression on me last year. The reason for the visits, and then, how do they feel on these scales? And then we'll also go to discipline data. So we are doing another one in high school at Deer Park. And so that's an example of one with measurement data, reasons for the visits, and then how much time they're spending. And so that's it. So thank you so much. We really appreciate partnering with CPS. I mean, it's a great partnership, so thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do board members have questions or comments? Ms. Bolton?
First question, thank you for the report. I'm always impressed and very proud of what we do here and with your partnership. You mentioned transition from the high school, let's say, to the college. What's the transition plan regarding when the kids are leaving sixth grade and entering our high schools?
So we also have a transition plan for that. It is it's an education. We target usually kids that are in treatment services to continue those treatment services. But it's interesting, your question, we might want to look at how we do the changes we made from high school to after high school. We were originally just targeting kids that were in treatment services, but really the information they need, you never know when you may need treatment services. So having such a small subset, we might want to consider broadening that. So right now, like for all graduating seniors, we'll be receiving information about how do you prepare in the summer before you start a job, or what should you be doing in those summer months to prepare for that? Usually it's the transition is like, yay, we got into college, or yay, we got a job. And then it starts, but there are things that you have to do in order to be ready from a wellness standpoint. And so maybe we should do that for the kids that are going to high school. Right now we have something, but it's only applied to kids that are in treatment. So we could make changes to that. That was a very good question.
Go ahead.
Also, you mentioned the calming spaces and what have you. Again, say, like I always say, I'm a supporter of in-school suspension rather than necessarily some of the things that we do, because I think your school family ultimately can take better care of you than perhaps going to another building. But I have to always say that when I get a chance to say it. I mean, I want people to know that that's a possibility and that you can use it in so many different ways besides just holding them in a room. This is an opportunity.
Exactly, it's an opportunity
to be with them and help them.
To build resilience.
Yes.
Yes.
And I just want us to keep that in mind if we could. And I'm interested in having the report if it's available electronically or.
Oh, sure, I'd be glad to, yeah. Roselawn Condon has been working with us, and they have an opening on November 15th for their in-school suspension but calming space. And Carson Elementary also is doing it, so, yeah. Sorry, I took too much. Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you on behalf of the board. It was good information.
Thank you.
We look forward to the next one where you've worked all the data out like you want.
I know, it's a work in process.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Bates? Well, first of all, we need a 48-hour waiver on this resolution. We need a motion for a 48-hour waiver.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll. Or do we need a voice vote? Voice vote, okay.
No, roll call, I'm sorry.
Roll call.
Yeah. Mrs.
I
Bates?
thought, okay, go ahead.
Aye.
Ms. Bolton? Aye. Mrs. Copeland-Dansby?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Aye. Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. Ms. Bates, would you please present the resolution?
Yes, I have a resolution to appoint a representative to the Ohio School Boards Association Board of Trustees, and I move that Carolyn Jones be the representative for the 2019 OSBA Board of Trustees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Comments?
I've served for the last 2 years, and it's a great organization. It's not one that particularly requires continuity, and I just think this is a really good opportunity for another member of our board to become more familiar with how that state organization works and to get involved on that level. So I'm happy to just pass the baton on to Ms. Jones and have her enjoy the work for the next year.
I would love to, if I'm voted, yeah.
Yeah, don't be so
Okay. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or comment? Did we do that? Yes.
What are the requirements for the person who serves?
There,
I'm sorry.
there are 3 Board of Trustee meetings annually, and you are, that person is also automatically on the Southwest Region Executive Committee meeting, and they meet, oh my goodness, I think it's a minimum of 3 times annually. And both the trustees and the Southwest Executive Committee are very active at the conference, so the expectation is that you attend the state conference.
Thank you. Ms. Wagner, there was a motion and a second already. Can you remind us who motioned the first time?
Ms. Bates motioned and Mr. Davis
Thank you.
seconded.
Thank you. Okay. Would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton? Aye. Mrs. Copeland-Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis? Aye. Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. All right. Okay, board matters this evening is a discussion about our 2018-2019 board goals and priorities. I don't know that there needs to be a lot of conversation, but we put all the information so nicely done, and thank Mr. Messer and Mr. Morosky for cleaning it up for us, and our ladies for adding all the material. But if you look at it, and I believe it was already discussed earlier in the committee report for the strategic plan initiative, what our priorities are for 2018 and 19. And so if you take a look at that, and I'm going to ask board members if they have any comments or have any questions about it. And if not, it's a done deal. Anybody have any comments or questions? Mr. Morosky.
Super quick comment. You may have noticed that you had a newly revised 11/5/2018 version of the document I was charged with writing. It was very minimal word moving around. Board Member Bolton had shot some last minute suggestions, and they were, I thought, solid. So just so you don't have to go through and figure out what they were. One of them was on creating better systems. The word enrich was added before educational environments. just to make the parallelism work better for all the English teachers in the room who know what parallelism is. So it reads better. The only other one too was the first sentence of student-centric decision-making was moved to the beginning of safety and security. And that is pretty much it. It was very minimal. I just wanted to point it out in case you were wondering if there were more substantive changes.
Okay, so would you please make sure that the ladies have it?
Oh, they do.
They
You have
did?
it too.
Okay, I do?
Well, you got it, but it wasn't a red line
I got
version.
you.
It was on your desk before the meeting. So just in case you were wondering, now you know.
Okay,
Okay.
got it. All right. Yes,
Can I add
Mr.
one
Messer?
thing? My aha after reviewing that was, I think it's implied, but perhaps we might want to be more deliberate in placing, even at the very top of the list, academic excellence.
Okay.
I think it's implied because of what we do, but, you know, I think that obviously is a focus, and we've talked about that, but I wouldn't know that necessarily where that specifically fits in here, and it could almost be a preamble or something that's the very top. We commit to excellence in academics, or whatever, and all of these pieces flow under that.
Ms. Bolton?
I'm not sure where it would fit. We might want to look at that. I always worry when it's academic excellence or whatever, because then you have to also think in terms of the other, the other couple of A's, whether it's athletics or the arts. I mean, it's excellence that we're pursuing. And I wonder if learning environments, there's somewhere in here, it talks about academic growth and outcomes. I think it's the student-centric decision-making. Maybe that could be beefed up or moved to the top, or I just worry when that's why we always try to include growth outcomes too, because it isn't just whether or not the kids are academically going, but whether there's, social, emotional growth as well, so. But maybe down there in student-centric might be a place that it could work best.
Okay. Mr. Morosky, followed by Ms. Copeland Dansby.
Or just a suggestion, because I like what Mr. Messer's talking about. Perhaps the student-centric decision-making sentence is the preamble. If we were to go that route, the Board of Education will ensure that proper funding and accountability is in place to promote robust teaching and learning that builds instructional capacity and improves academic and growth outcomes.
I like that idea.
And that could be like the
That's
thesis
good.
statement, more English teachers.
Cool.
Okay. Ms. Copeland Dansby.
I can agree with that. I think what Mr. Messer is saying is critically important. My suggestion would be in the beginning of the document, when it talks about the effect of poverty on the district's capacity to pursue its vision and mission. I think our vision and mission deals with academia and the academic excellence and striving of our students. So perhaps in that sentence, we can mention the academic support there. I don't think that the academic support should be parallel to arts or athletics. I think those are support or extracurricular opportunities. So the comment about really focusing on academics, I think, is critically important. I don't want to take away from the student-centric, because I think that is a standalone, and we can do some really great things there. If it were moved up per Ms. Bolton's suggestion, I think that'd be great too. So to me, it's basically a colon, vision and mission, to support the academic excellence of our students and children, or something like that. I do want to both, sure. I do want to publicly thank these young men over here for taking the lead from our planning session and putting this together. You do not know how wonderful this is. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, since I'm looking over here, you guys were very helpful in putting this together. Maybe you could word the preamble piece and make those changes, or at least make sure that the ladies get it. So, yeah, thank you so much. Okay, any other questions and thoughts about this? Okay, all right. Ms. Superintendent Mitchell.
Can I add something quickly to board matters? I'm not sure if this is something we want to discuss this evening, but we all received the letter from, or the memo from Ashley Ado regarding the Lighthouse Community Schools request for financial assistance, and also their letter. And I'm not going to take credit for this, but I think it's a great idea. I think it came from somebody on our board, that we explore having them become, was that you, Mike? Explore having them become a CPS school. And we become the instructional part of that school, and the experts in, in social work and mental support, mental health support, will do their part and have a true partnership, whatever we have to do to span this and then take it on. I wanted to follow up on that idea that was floated and see, I'm not in favor of giving a charter school supported by somebody else our money. I don't want to start that precedent at all. I'm not interested in that, but I'm interested in helping this population of children. And so I wanted to start the discussion there.
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion to have. I was gonna probably try to work that in as an assignment at the end for the administration to investigate whether or not that is legally possible and financially possible. And I think the reality is, if it is one of our schools, if it becomes part of our portfolio, I'm not supportive of it being the charter and giving money and what have you, but you might also investigate if there would not, frankly, be a need for having more than one within the system, based upon what we are continuing to hear about the challenges that face a number of our students. But I know the teacher-student ratio is different than what we have. I know it would, we have facility issues already, but I think it would be a very valid thing to try to think if there's a way that we could offer those kinds of services and actually bring them under our umbrella. And you'd have to also consult with the CFT and our other bargaining units as well, from a standpoint that maybe like other things, it might require special arrangements or not some sorts of suspensions or MOUs or whatever, to think about it a bit regarding the contracts.
Mr. Morosky?
Yeah, I think it may have been me, but I know I've certainly thought about it, and I visited Lighthouse Community School not long ago to just see firsthand what was going on there, and I was extremely impressed. It's not an easy population of young person to have in a classroom, and they do some pretty impressive things. And the need is certainly great, and going off sort of the Mind Piece presentation that we had, this would be, I think, a really interesting thing to add to our portfolio of schools. And if there was, and I was actually, I can check off an assignment then, I was gonna assign a similar thing, like, I don't know the first thing about bringing on a pre-existing program, so I'll let you make the assignment. You can probably word it better than me. But I think it's something to think about, because we do not, I'll speak for myself, I do not want to see that school close.
So it sounds like we have an assignment coming up. Thank you. Okay. Superintendent Mitchell, do you have a report?
I do. I have a very short report, starting with Pleasant Hill School. So Pleasant Hill School had more than 400 volunteers from Cincinnati Bell, College Hill Urban Development Corporation, and Keep Cincinnati Beautiful, working with in their school grounds to really make this school a school of interest and a model in terms of environmental science. So we're very excited about that. And you can see some examples of the work that took place. So you see the principal there, resource coordinator, and I'm not sure who the other gentleman is, but lots of people in the community coming around, rallying around to support that school. So we're really excited about that. Second of all, we'd like to announce that Pleasant Ridge Montessori recognized or held their 10-year anniversary So this is an opportunity, a program called Hands Around the School for the community and parents to come into the school to really embrace what the students are learning and be a part of the school community. And here are some pictures of kids during that celebration. Girls to Women. So last week we had over 100 girls from Girls to Women take part in a very special event in which they learned about developing their leadership and social skills. We're happy to say that Girls to Women program has expanded last year from 11 schools to now 22 schools, so we are in some of our elementary schools. We had some impressive presenters. Morgan Owens, who is an entrepreneur who wrote a book and really shares her life story around self-esteem and how she was able to overcome it, and was just really inspiring for many of our young women. Last week, we also had the honor last Friday to welcome in 14 universities and colleges into our CPS fold. So 14 of them came on board to sign an agreement to be in partnership with Cincinnati Public Schools, centered around how do we give more of our kids access, how do we prepare them, and then how do we really have that smooth transition and handoff from CPS to our universities and colleges. And so we were very excited about that. We've been in partnership with Strive, which really helped to broker the relationship with these organizations and to build an agreement that everyone could sign on to, in which we're going to really be sharing our data in terms of our success as well as the university and college's success. We were very, very fortunate to have one of our recent alumni, Azaria Carter, be able to come back and speak. She is a sophomore at the University of Cincinnati. She lives in the Gen 1 house. I believe she started off as a sociology major. She is now transitioned over to education. So she wants to be a teacher in our district, and then eventually she wants to be an administrator. Yeah, so very exciting. This is hosted at Aiken High School. Yeah, that's right. Last but not least, we'd like to be able to announce the Cincinnati Association Awards. So this is an opportunity for educators and anyone within the school community to be recognized for their good work. And so just wanted to highlight that the nominations are due November the 16th. If you go on to the CPS website, you will find information where you may be able to nominate someone who you feel is deserving of this award. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Do I have a motion to approve the revised recommendations of the superintendent? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Ms. Wagner, please. Yes. Ms. Holden.
I noticed that there will be an opening in the social studies manager position. What's the timeline on that notice and that hire?
Yes, very soon. So I know that social studies, we recognize it is a critical area. Having said that, we also recognize we had a very serious need in our assessment department, which impacts elementary, primary, elementary, middle school, high school, ACT, I mean, the whole gamut, the state report card, EMIS reporting. And so it was critically important for us to make sure that we had someone in that key role right away. And so someone who has been working with that department, our social studies manager, Justin Leach, is going to, our hope is that he'll be able to assume that role and we'll be able to backfill his position. So we are taking very seriously being able to recruit someone for that position, but quite honestly, at the same time, recognize that we had a major priority in the testing department.
Mr. Davis.
To Ms. Sellers' earlier point in regards to our replenishing problem, do we have a plan in regards to replenishing Paris?
We do, and actually, I'm going to ask Paul McDowell to come forward. We talked about this most recently this morning. So we have three major areas that we are focused on: attracting, developing, and connecting. And so the connecting piece is all about retention. And so, quite honestly, retaining and recruiting paraprofessionals can be a challenge. So I did put this down as an assignment for me to follow up with Paul McDowell and also with Julie Sellers in terms of some creative ways to be able to solve these problems.
And as as Superintendent Mitchell said, we've been talking about this because we know this has been a challenge. As Ms. Sellers identified, we have 15 resigning in one board recommendation. We have 8 that we're adding to. We started doing some work on this last year as paraprofessionals were resigning. When you talk about retention, we were trying to get an idea of why they were resigning. Was it the environment? Was it the pay? Was it how we pay them? And there was many reasons that came out, and a lot of them will have to be negotiated with ASME, which is the union that represents them, as far as work schedule, time, hourly pay. Those were probably some of the biggest. But as far as a plan, yes, it is always our immediate attention to make sure that we have our building staffed. Do we have some vacancies? Yes, we do for paraprofessionals, and we're working very hard to fill those as quickly as we can with the support of our schools. We have a piece too, as parapositions become available, they have to be posted. Teachers, you only get to transfer one time. But for paraprofessionals, for our clerical staff, those positions, vacancies as they come up, they have to be posted year-round. So that does cause a bit of a delay in us posting those positions. That's following the contract. But to answer the initial question, yes, we are working very hard to fill the positions, and I also would be glad to hear any recommendations that Ms. Sellers might have as well. Thank you.
Ms. Bolton?
I'm going to say it again. We are not going to get as many paras as we need as long as the AFSCME union leadership insists on all of their bargaining unit segments getting the same percentage increase. It's never going to happen because those paras, now that we've placed all kinds of additional responsibilities and credentials that are needed for paras, those people are being underpaid for the work that they are doing, and they are not getting the increases that they should be getting when we negotiate. And this has gone on at least 4 master contracts that I can think of, because they are only allowed to get the same percentage that everybody else gets. There are so many different units within AFSCME, whether it's our security people or whether it's whoever it is, our lunch people, whatever. They cannot continue to be treated totally the same. If we have an equity policy that pertains to our human resources as much as it pertains to our children and our families, that has to be addressed. And we can't negotiate in public, but I'm just going to say we will not fill this need until those wages change.
Ms. Bates?
Yes, and I'll bring this up. What would it take to move our paras over to CFT and get them out of AFSCME? Maybe I'm asking you, but we have our union leader right here. But I mean, their role certainly is moving more and more towards instructional. So it's, I'm not.
So the positions are in the ASME agreement. I believe in order for those to be released or move forward, they have to be willing to release those, just as substitute teachers are under the CFT collective bargaining agreement, and CFT doesn't just have to release those, they would have to release those to be not bargained. So that would be something that definitely could be taken to negotiations. We did make some strides in last negotiations as far as paying paras more when they were working in our specialized units. That was a directive of the board. We worked very hard on that. Was there an opportunity to pay more? Sure.
Other questions or comments? Sounds like a work in progress.
It is, and thank you for the understanding behind that too.
Thank you. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland-Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs.
Quickly.
Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky? President Jones?
Aye. Okay, inquiries and updates. Ms. Bates?
Yes, when I went to the Council of Great City Schools, I didn't do a written report like you all did when you went into NSBA, but because it's kind of not my style.
We know.
But I do have an update, and this was like one of the coolest sessions that I went to. And I talked to Ms. Mitchell about this as well. But I went to a session on school safety, right? Surprise, it's one of my big, well, many of us, but I especially am interested in that. And this falls clearly under the administration's purview, so it's not something I'm going to make an assignment. I just want to give you kind of an interesting summary of what I learned. And the presentation was by the Baltimore City Schools and the Denver City Schools. And they're doing it totally differently than one would think would be the typical way to do it. Metal detectors don't work. They just don't. You know, their data in these two districts show that really doesn't reduce the incidence of guns. What does reduce the incidence of guns, and kind of narrowed it down to three areas, which I thought was so interesting. One is technology. Kids will tell each other, you know, the kids know who have the guns, but they don't want to snitch. So both, I know that Baltimore has an app, so kids can be anonymous in their reporting, and I know that Ms. Mitchell's already on that. When I told her that, she was like, yeah, makes perfect sense, so that the students have access to an app to report that kind of behavior, because, you know, they want to be as safe as we want them to be safe. So that's very interesting, but, you know, using technology that they're comfortable with, rather than what we are, which is often limited. The other is developing, the staff of the school developing strong relationships with the students, even more so than, you know, than right now, just that being a real priority in our schools. Again, our child student-centric priority in our board goals and priorities. But pointedly, you know, developing those relationships with regard to safety. And the other, and this was something that I thought was very interesting too, that the staff, especially the staff that greet the students as they come in, that they are trained to recognize changes in behavior. So if a child acts a certain way and one day acts very differently, there's something up with that child. So it was just, I mean, the approaches seem to make a lot of sense. What we're doing now is almost like a whack-a-mole, you know? I mean, really, the way that, and it's not just us, it's the entire country. But I wanted to present that, at least the highlights of that session, so that Ms. Mitchell can further research, and in a prior conversation we had, she definitely is interested in looking at these three strategies.
Great, yes. Thank you. Other inquiries and updates? Yes, Ms. Bolton.
I think it's an inquiry regarding the RFP for the consultant for the strategic planning committee.
So it is in process, and so it will launch relatively soon.
And then also, this might be an assignment, let me think. Yes, I guess those are assignments.
Okay. Inquiry and update or
It's an
assignment?
inquiry. I think it's an
Yes, go
inquiry.
ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had some conversations, just in, you know, I think there's a awareness starting at our superintendent and throughout the organization that employee engagement is going to be something that will take our district from here to here. And, you know, kind of the, you know, things that we hear, whether it's a student who has a particular situation that they don't know who to go to, or a staff member, thinking through this anonymous app, a lot of companies have an anonymous process that is a hotline, for lack of a better word. We call it the Credo hotline. And it allows you to say, this is what's happening in my environment. I'm fearful of retaliation or whatever. I'd like to have this reported. And they do kind of a investigation. And then they kind of look for trends and see where improvements might need to be made. And I guess the inquiry is, what is that process? And then if there is one, or is it more of the old fashioned, like call your HR person and it's really open and maybe uncomfortable for some. And this kind of references maybe some of the earlier conversations.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bates?
Well, kind of to add on to that, and I guess I was going to bring this up in policy, but what Mr. Messer just discussed would encompass this bigger picture. But last month, we received, or Policy Committee received, an assignment to look at the policy regarding surveys. And the more I thought about that, I thought we don't want to limit communication with our staff. We want to expand it, whether it's, people that feel uncomfortable, getting information out to our staff so, so they know what's going on in the district and can communicate to our families. And also, encourage, and also taking the lead on determining the needs of our teachers, our staff members, everyone involved. So we have been really focusing on external communication and external engagement. And what I was going to propose during policy, and as long as you brought that up, is that instead of having a policy regarding surveys, that we have a policy regarding internal communications and engagement, as we do have a policy regarding external communications and engagement. So that would encompass what Mr. Messer discussed, and also the surveys, and also just generally, engaging the people who work in our district. So anyway, I'm going to be raising that as an issue during policy with regard to other communications that have been assigned to us.
Okay, Mr. Davis, and then Ms. Bolton.
I believe I've probably got a inquiry. I know I have an update, and it may be an assignment.
Go for it.
So to Marlena's earlier point in regards to a directory for GSAs and GSTAs, do we have a directory of such? Do we know where those organizations are fitting inside our school buildings? Well, we might, but it's running low on memory.
Yeah.
Did that come out of my head?
So I don't know the answer to that question, but I will explore it and find out in terms of a directory.
I'll make it.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And
Be an assignment. Go
and
ahead.
my update is that I am being like those guys and making a report, unlike Ms. Bates here, in regards to our trip to Great City Schools. And it was an incredible conference. Any conference that you can go to where Kazir Khan, Michelle Alexander, and Dr. Jill Biden are your keynote speakers. It was absolutely an absolute blessing.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bolton. Your turn.
I had a follow-up, I think maybe, and it might end up being an assignment based upon what Mr. Messer said regarding the anonymous kind of tip line. I'm not sure what we do have and what we don't have, but we do have a whistleblower policy in place, and it might be good for maybe policy and the administration to review that policy. And also, I know that there's a capability by the internal auditor to receive complaints and whatever. So I think maybe if we just send it to policy, they can actually review what we have and how we can augment it.
Great. Assignments? Mr. Davis, go ahead.
I believe the superintendent's already accepted my assignment to put together a list of GSAs and GSTAs across the district.
Okay, Ms. Bolton?
I have a couple. First and foremost, the one is the lighthouse one, and I think the superintendent wrote that down already. Another one I have is I would like the administration to review our local policies and procedures regarding prevailing wage and also local contractors, local and minority business, both women and minority. I think the administration needs to review what our expectations are locally that is already in policy. We've gone down this road before, and we made changes as a result. The gentleman was correct to say that this is a law that does allow school districts to not use the prevailing wage, and we can certainly look into that, but there's other things that should be impacting, and I would hope that the bid letting has encompassed what is board policy and procedures regarding local and minority contractors and also wage issues.
Okay.
Oh, and then, White House prevailing wage. I can hold that off for another month.
Okay. Other assignments? Hurry up. Hearing no, okay.
Oh, wait.
Okay. Ms. Bolton?
You weren't fast enough.
I know, I was
You
waiting.
gotta be faster than that. I notice you don't look over here. But no, this is actually quite critical, and I would hope that we can, on the next meeting, which is at the end of November, the board can come prepared to discuss the CUCI report, as well as the 15-page report that was now passed by this preschool board, to have some sort of a pilot. Decisions are being made based upon us not even having an opportunity to discuss or be prepared to discuss. I understand last week that the pilot passed the Cincinnati Preschool Board, and I know we've not yet put together our thoughts on the 120-some page report, CUCI, and I also know that the Workforce Development Committee is not necessarily operating with any particular parameters from this board.
Okay. So you're asking that that be on our agenda
Yes,
for board matters?
it's very
Gotcha.
important,
Gotcha.
because it seems to be things want to get done in a particular place, and people are not paying enough attention to the process and who actually has the money.
Okay, well, that's a huge subject. Okay, having no other business before us, I declare the meeting adjourned.
That's, you got that?